basketball. You're joined by my co-host Caleb Dudley. Caleb, how are you today, man?
I'm good. Another week, getting down to the wire.
I know, another week. Quick PA before we get started. I apologize. You can probably hear I lost my voice. I'm on the mend, but I sound a little different. So Caleb's going to do a lot of the talking today, which is probably a good thing anyway. So apologize for that. But today on this episode, we're going to talk about Duke men's basketball's win against Michigan in DC. I was there for that, so I'll recap the coverage and the action, what I thought from that. It was just a phenomenal win for the Blue Devils against the top team in the country. Then we're going to talk to Martin Heinzelman and Andrew Negus because Duke women's basketball, their win streak is over. They traveled down to Clemson and fell to the Tigers in Little John Coliseum. Then for the first time ever, we're going to talk some fencing on Blue Devil Beat. Morgan Kay, one of our fencing beats, is going to talk to Caleb about the fencing team winning the ACC championship. The men won that. And then finally, we're going to talk to Thomas Baxter of the Cavalier Daily because Duke men's basketball has another ranked opponent on the weekend. That's 4 straight in a row for the Blue Devils. And it's going to be a 5th one with UNC. So exciting stuff all around the podcast. But first, this podcast is brought to you by Duke Stores. Support your favorite Duke team. Duke Stores is home to the only collection of merchandise brought to you straight from Duke University. Go to shop.duke.edu for all of your Duke merch. Okay, so the 68-63 low-scoring slugfest there in DC. I thought that second half was so good defensively for Duke, and we'll get into this more. But let's just start. What did you like out of this performance from the Blue Devils? Because there was a lot to like there.
Yeah, I think you just said it. What is there not to like, really? I thought, obviously we talked about this. We both, I know last week said pick Michigan to come out on top, but I thought, Duke was up for the challenge, and it's not a surprise at all. I think Duke's been up for the challenge all year, every team they've played, but I thought Duke did well to weather the storm. I think, a big storyline was Cam Boozer getting his 4th foul with a good bit of the game to go, and Duke having to hold on to a lead there, and they were able to hold on to the lead for the most part. I know Lindenborg ended up making it close, and then had a game when Boozer came back in. But I thought it was really impressive. I think one of the main stories is Nick Aminia. Had 9 rebounds, played really, really well down low against a ginormous front court of the Wolverines. And so, it wasn't pretty offense at times for either team, but I thought it was really impressive. And obviously, what you need if you're going to be a title contender, and now Duke's the new number 1 team in the country. So excellent win for John Shire and company.
Yeah, Menu was awesome. He had those 9 rebounds. He also forced the 3rd foul on Adai Mara, I believe, and he also was just scrappy, falling on the ground, getting loose balls, and that's what you really need. And Dusty May afterwards said this team is better than any team he has ever faced at getting their misses and knowing where the ball is going to be. It almost feels like it's taught. Duke is very, very good at offensive rebounding and just chasing the ball. It seems like even when Duke misses its shots, it knows where it's going to be. So that was very impressive, especially against the front court like Michigan. Obviously, Mara being out helps that, but Duke winning the rebounding battle, out-rebounding Michigan by the most they had ever been out-rebounded by this season is very, very impressive, especially with Boozer's foul trouble. And the help across the board was phenomenal. So I also thought defensively, in the first half, Yaxel Lindenberg went off.
Yeah.
LJ Kaysen off the bench had a quality performance, and then they were completely shut down in the second half. Lindenberg didn't make a field goal until that late 3-pointer.
Yep.
Kaysen, I believe, was held scoreless in the second half, and that was big. I mentioned in my little preview, what Michigan shooting team would we get? Michigan shot 6 for 25 from 3. Some of that they just missed open shots. Some of that was credit to Duke's length, but Duke has been forcing teams to shoot pretty poor from 3 of late.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is credit to the backcourt of Duke for defensive effort. Elliot Cadeau was 1 for 6 from 3. Namari Burnett was 0 for 3. He didn't score a single point in the game. And then Roddy Gale had 2 points, and Trey McKinney had 2 points, and was 1 for 6. So, Kaysen was really the only guard that got anything going consistently, and he only played 14 minutes. And a lot of that was just because Cadeau went to the bench with an injury, a seeming injury that he came back in from. So I thought, Kale Foster, Isaiah Evans, and Dominic Sarr continued to impress on the perimeter. And Caden Boozer as well continue to play solid defense and stand tall. What I was really impressed with was, you mentioned the rebounding. I mentioned last week that I thought it was imperative that Duke didn't settle for threes, and it drove into the paint even if they got blocked. And Boozer said exactly that after the game. They were like, yeah, we knew we were going to get blocked a couple times by Mara and Johnson, but we got to keep trying to get at the rim. And Mara had 2 blocks, Johnson had 3, and Yaxel had 2. But for Duke not to have to settle into a 3-point shootout and be able to get downhill, especially Boozer, who had the last 7 points, I want to say, before Evans hit the 2 free throws to ice it. He's just Boozer's just, I mean,
Insane.
you can't do anything with him. He's unstoppable, and he had 18, 10, and 7. Not his best stat line of the year, which is pretty crazy to say against the number one team. But I thought he did a good job, especially late in the game. I thought Shire had a masterclass in the last 4 minutes. We can talk about that, but especially on the defensive end, they had Cam kind of sit there and drop and wait, play off of Yoxel. They were going to let Yoxel shoot it if they're going to live with that and try to make it tough for him down the stretch. I thought was really impressive, and Boozer, continues to cement himself as the best player in the country, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it was very nice to see 4 starters score double figures. Caleb Foster hit 2 threes in the first half, his first multi-3 game since we covered the Louisville game. A long time ago, it feels like.
Yeah.
And so that was just good for him to see the ball go down, and he was aggressive. Let's talk about those 4 minutes. What did you like about Shire's play calling there at the end? Because it was phenomenal, and I'll go into it too. But
I mean, yeah, we mentioned this a couple weeks ago. I think I brought up the graph that Duke's, the best in special teams. So it's like out of timeouts, drawn up plays, and no better example than that. It was just under 4 minutes, I want to say, right?
Yep.
And under the 4, and Shire draws up the screen for Pat to throw a lob to Isaiah. Isaiah catches it wide open. No one's even close to him because they have Mara out on the perimeter guarding Pat. And it was just, it was masterful. And Duke really needed a bucket there. I think it was a 1-point game at that point. So Duke really needed that one, and I thought every single play they went down the stretch, especially when they got Cam back into the game, they got Cam good looks. Obviously, any look at the rim for Cam Boozer is a good look, and so Shire continues to. I think his X's and O's coaching continues to be underrated somehow, despite Duke being 25-2 and have won plenty of close games this year. But if you saw any other plays, there's videos out there you can find on Twitter and online of every single play, and Shire, all of them are excellent.
yeah, no, it's just beautiful how Duke's offense is built off of this off-ball screening and adjustments, these cuts off the screens. Shire noticed Michigan stopped switching, so that's why Isaiah Evans became wide open on that. When they were switching earlier, it caused Duke some trouble. Duke turned the ball over a little bit, but that play was excellent. And then the 3 down the stretch for Boozer, Foster had caught the ball kind of under the basket off a cut, but got doubled and then pitched it out behind him to Boozer on the left wing, I believe, for 3. And so that was just a cool play between the two of them to see that chemistry. But yeah, tremendous performance from the Blue Devils there on offense.
Yeah, I think I have it pulled up here just so there's so many of them I wasn't trying to forget. But you have, I think a lot of the things were things that Duke's excelled at all year and has really drilled in. Like you think about the flares for Evans.
Yes.
Have succeeded a lot. They did it with Foster too late in the game. The Evans ghost screen for Cam has been a play they've gone to quite a bit, and that got the late goaltend on Mara down low. And obviously you have pick and roll with Cam and Pat switching down low too, and all those other things Duke's excelled at all season long. And at this point in the season, they kind of have it down to a T. I think, I guess there was a lot. We talked about this a couple weeks ago with the North Carolina game. There was a lot made out about the shot at the end of the game for Cam Boozer, the layup he missed against Vasar. But I thought, looking at it, like you look at the stats and people were posting them all about this game, and Cam's like, if not one of the most clutch players in the country, and he's scoring over a point per possession in clutch time, and he can score from any part of the floor. I thought, he's 1 for 2 from 3. He got 5 for 7 at the line, 6 for 10 overall. He had 7 assists and 1 turnover. Like, I think with him down low and the focal point of the offense, it's going to be really hard to stop Duke the rest of the season. We talked about Isaiah. He didn't shoot well. Obviously, he was 2 for 9, but he did absolutely poster a Dimara, which was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool.
And I think that's the testament to how much he's worked on his game, and his driving ability has been much improved. I think he has 15 or 16 dunks this season, which is a lot for a guy who doesn't known as a shooter. But yeah, I thought it was despite shooting 30% from 3 and only 71% from the line, it's about as good as you can do.
Yeah. Very, very solid win for the Blue Devils, best win of the year. And yeah, 25-2 and won the Capital One Showcase there. All right, well, we'll be right back because we're going to talk to Martin and Andrew about some women's basketball after this.
Yep. All right, everyone, we're back. Talk to some women's basketball now. We have returning guests, Martin Heinzelman, knower of all women's basketball. We also have Andrew Negus, another women's basketball beat here for the Chronicle, first time. Andrew, welcome on.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
All right, so we have you guys on because you guys covered the Clemson game this past weekend. Before we talk about the game itself, how was the coverage experience? Everything went okay?
Oh yeah, I would say it was an enjoyable. It's a cool stadium. It's a long drive. I would say, what else? We saw a lot of I-85.
A lot of I-85.
True.
Enjoyed some good barbecue.
Okay.
Shout out to
Yeah.
home team.
Home team barbecue in Greenville. Was it
Greenville.
Greenville?
Yes.
Greenville.
We stopped in Greenville on
We
the way
stopped in
back.
Greenville.
Andrew got mugged, but besides that, it was cool.
I
Yeah.
wish.
Sorry, I'll tell him not to do that.
Yeah,
again.
no,
Set that up.
But yeah, it was cool. I don't know. What do
Okay.
you think?
Super cool arena. Even with like it didn't seem like completely full, but it's very loud. So I mean, just
Yeah.
being in that environment is always like a cool place, and it was a very true road test for the Blue Devils.
Yeah, so jumping forward to the game, obviously it's end of a 17-game win streak for Kara Lawson's squad. What did you guys see that kind of went wrong down in Little John Coliseum this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think there was a lot of defensive lapses. So just the defense was kind of sliding most of with the exception of that first quarter. And I kind of wrote about this a little bit, but I think it was very similar to like the Miami and Wake Forest games where, there was trouble to guard inside. Like Demira Hines exploded for I think 13 points, and guarding the paint and the lack of efficiency on the offensive glass gave Clemson a lot more opportunities, and with more opportunities they had more chances to put it in and get the win.
Yeah, and I mean, Coach Lawson just talked a lot about execution, especially when it mattered. I felt like this was very much a regression to the Duke women's basketball offensive performances of yore. I feel like Duke generally this year has done a pretty good job of actually scoring the basketball, which makes my job much more enjoyable because I get to watch the ball go through the net. But felt like Sunday it was a little bit more of like a classic Duke plays pretty good defense. They only gave up 53 points, but they scored less than that, right? And you can't do that, right? You can't score 51 points and expect to win the basketball game. And so I think we saw it here was just backcourt didn't play well. Taina Mayer and Ashlyn Jackson both had pretty poor games. And then that late game execution ultimately doomed them. The botched handoff in the last play was just, what are you going to do?
And Ashlyn didn't score until that last three, right?
Yep.
Down the stretch, which hurts. And especially when you need a balanced offensive output. For combined bench points, Jordan Wood and Ari, Jordan had that 1-3 and then Ari only a free throw. So that probably makes life difficult for Toby Fournier to have a lot of that weight shouldered on her.
Yeah, for sure. I like Ari's over 5. At least Ari's taking shots. Points for that. Because
He'll take some shots.
Ari took 5 field goals. Ashlyn Jackson didn't shoot all that much either Ashlyn Jackson is a volume shooter. Her scoring rate leaves something to be desired, but she shoots a lot. And I felt like for whatever reason, they just could not get going. 3 points from Ashlyn, and you need more than that out of your sort of starting guard.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think especially Toby Fournier works much better when the backcourt is playing their best. I mean, when you look at the victory against North Carolina, Toby Fournier didn't have quite as her explosive game like she's been having on these throughout this win streak.
Mm-hmm.
But I think superior backcourt play helped them or propelled them to that victory and has kind of just set the pace for this team. And I think, that's just very characteristic.
I wanted to ask about kind of the disparity between the first quarter Duke won 20-8 and the last quarter Duke lost 23-12. What did you guys kind of see adjustments wise from Clemson that allowed them to kind of flip the script there?
I mean, one thing is Clemson finally started making 3-pointers. I don't have the quarter by quarter stats, but Clemson was just all of a sudden shooting the ball at a much higher part of the thing that was happening throughout this game was both teams were generating decent looks and just breaking them over and over and over again. Just corner threes, pull-ups, whatever. They were open shots, they were decent shots, and they just weren't falling. And in that last quarter, it seemed like Clemson finally caught some of the energy. They were feeling oh, we're in this game now. This is our game. This is a game we can win against a big-name team. And they started really shooting the ball well. Obviously, that buzzer beater is that is a solid foot and a half from beyond the arc that I think it was Morgan Lee shoots.
Hannah
Cone, sorry. Shoots those shots started to fall, and I think Duke got in their heads. In terms of the execution on the floor, it was pretty much the same. Just some blown switches on screens. There were some stupid points in that last quarter where the screener would just get down and there was no one there. They weren't talking well in terms of they had switched the whole game, and then they sort of started looking like trying to hedge, and then they blew it, and then everyone started to score.
And I think the Blue Devils especially looked towards Fournier to kind of propel them in that late fourth quarter scoring. And, she was the victim of the double team. And just, there's a lot of, I would say this game was very controlled by the turnovers, Duke having 17 throughout the contest and giving up 17 points off of those. But I would say, yeah, the double team, Fournier, not fully responding to that. And, they made Clemson made 4 out of their last 5 to end it, and they just kind of stole it at the death.
Yeah. Looking forward now, past this game, obviously Duke's going to look to finish out strong. They have Florida State on Thursday and then at North Carolina on Sunday to finish out the regular season. What are you guys looking forward to in either one of those games as Duke, heads into the postseason?
I think Florida State's not a particularly good ACC team. I wouldn't say they're at 14th right now in the conference. So hopefully Florida State is just sort of a tune-up. You never want to look past a team, as Chair Lawson would tell you. But Florida State should be a win. I've been informed. Florida State should be a win, barring something ridiculous. I think we can look for some players to find a shooting stroke that they lost against Clemson. Make some field goals, get your confidence back a little bit in terms of making things in game flow. And then I'm prepared for an absolutely demoralizing basketball game. I mean, there's probably going to be babies crying. Like it's going to be brutal in Chapel Hill. Maybe this year's been a little better. The first game this year, both teams have scored pretty well. Maybe they're not playing defensive identities of years past. But I feel like it would only be fair, fair to me and my last ever coverage of Duke UNC in the regular season to get like a 35-33 barn burner. Like I really want to see something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the Florida State game is obviously the one that's going to require the most attention. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Duke remains in the driver's seat for the number 1 seed for the ACC tournament and regular season title. But I would say, if they can get that victory, they can sort of control their own destiny. And, the Clemson loss, I'd argue, couldn't have come at a better time. I think, it avoids the period of March.
Mm-hmm.
It, addresses some of the weaknesses that we've seen towards the end of this win streak. And, there's a lot to play for left. And, Louisville also, to their credit, dropped the game against Virginia. So that keeps Duke right in the driver's seat towards this championship.
And one thing I'll say about UNC, the last game, there was a lot of controversy about the 21-0 free throws from Duke to UNC, so that's just a point of note. So who knows what will happen in Chapel Hill, but I feel like Courtney Banghart is going to be on the officials' nose about that.
She'll be advocating. That is sure. One thing about you can trust Courtney Banghart will advocate.
She will advocate.
Yep.
And look, there'll probably be a lot of fouls. Who's going to make their free throws? I feel like these teams are scrappy, so we'll see. North Carolina is also playing some of their best basketball of the year, so
yeah, I think
should be fun.
Looking forward. You mentioned Duke's in the driver's seat, and I think looking right now, Duke's also a 3 seed in bracketology, so important to get those games handled to make sure you host the game for the first 2 rounds, which would be huge for Carol Lawson and company.
And my travel budget here
Yeah,
at the sports as well. Yep.
Yeah, true.
Tremendous.
Okay. Well, anything else, guys? No.
Just watch the games.
Yeah,
Duke UNC is gonna be a good one. I'm excited.
Yeah, follow our coverage, DukeChronicle.com, women's basketball tab.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. All right. We're back for what I think is the first ever fencing discussion on Louisville Beat. We're here with Morgan, who's one of our fencing beats and who covered this weekend at Cameron for the championship. Morgan, to start, can you just talk about the coverage experience as a whole? Obviously, it's always good to get to cover in the confines of your own school and in a gym as historic as Cameron. So just talk about the coverage experience this weekend.
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, I'm really excited to be here. Happy to shine some light on fencing. It really deserves more attention in the sports world. But it was an overall great experience. They hosted in Cameron this year. And so it was just really nice to be able to have sort of that home field advantage. I think the team could really tell that. Pretty good student turnout. Their teammates were really cheering them on. And so it was a really great atmosphere and sort of a different atmosphere compared to a lot of the fencing events. It's definitely a very long sport. Basically, all Saturday and Sunday was spent fencing. And so on Saturday, it was the women's teams event and the men's individual events. And then on Sunday, you had the women's individual and the men's teams events. And so a very long process and a process where all the fencers were just constantly involved and constantly cheering on their teammates. And Yeah, I mean, I think the coolest thing about the coverage was just the opportunity for them to compete in Cameron and for them to sort of have the support of the student body, which isn't something that fencing gets very often.
Yeah. Before we kind of jump into the play of Duke itself, can you just give us a little bit of knowledge about the format of fencing? Like, what does it take for you to win a fencing championship?
Yeah, of course. So, as far as the championship itself, that is more on the team side of things.
Yep.
So, I mentioned that there are individual events. And so you can win an individual ACC championship, but that wasn't something that Duke was really focused on going into the weekend.
Yep.
Coach Omar had mentioned that they really put their best players in the team events. That's where they were really focusing. So we didn't see great results in the individual events, and that was pretty much why they really were focusing on that team style. And so essentially how it works is there are 3 different events in fencing. So you have saber, epee, and foil. And so there's going to be 9 bouts in each of those events, and there are 5 rounds, one of which is a bye. And
Okay.
so basically you face off against one school each round. And once you get through all 27 basically of the bouts within that round, you're able to determine who's the winner. So
Yep.
there's 27 points up for grabs, and just depending on how each of those bouts go is how it's going to end up working. So there's equal weighting amongst all of the events, and then they took their overall record
Yep.
across those 5 rounds to determine who would be the winner, and that ended up being forcing a tiebreaker. So
Yeah.
both Boston College and Duke were tied 3-1. And so even though Boston College had previously had the head-to-head victory, they just went by overall record, and so that forced a tiebreaker. And that just saw only 3 bouts, one in each of the events.
Mm.
And so we just chose, or like Duke just chose the best fencers for each category.
Right.
And it was best 2 out of 3.
Yeah. Okay. Very, very informative. So obviously Duke coming into this, the men's team was the 4th seed out of 5 in the ACC. Can you just talk about kind of the improbability of losing your first bout to Boston College and then going on the run they did to end up winning the conference?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was really a surprise to everyone, I think. Consistently, the women's fencing team has been seeded higher and usually has better predicted outcomes than the men's team. They went in as a 2 seed for the weekend, and the men's team went in as a 4th seed. And so this definitely was not expected. After watching that first match for Boston College, that was sort of what I thought was going to happen. And, it seemed like that was just sort of how it was going to continue. Like they would just finish maybe 3rd or 4th. And after that first match, you really didn't see anything that was indicating that they were going to go and win the championship. But I think they really just pulled it around. They really struggled in saber and foil to start off with. And if you look at later matches, those became some of their strongest events. And so I think they were really determined to do well. And Coach Homer was saying that this is something they've been looking towards all season. It's something they've really been working on. And so while it is a shock, anything can happen in fencing. There are only 5 teams. So, yeah, I think they just were really, really focused on that team event and on building sort of that team-focused style. And that really benefited them in this event.
All right. So let's talk about this fence off. This fence off against Boston College. You mentioned it was best 2 out of 3, and I believe Duke won the first 2 before they even got to a third. So can you just talk about, or who did Duke put up for these events, and then just give us kind of a rundown of some of the best players on the best fencers on the roster, I suppose.
Yeah, so they put up Lev Ermakov for saber, and then Biko Toba for foil, and Ethan Boroditsky for epee. And so those were considered their best 3 players in each of the events. And they all pretty much started at the same time. There was a bit of a delay with saber, and so that's the one that didn't end up finishing.
Right.
But I think ideally they would have started at the same time. That's usually how they format it. And so we first saw Biko win his match. And so that was really exciting. You could really tell the players were excited. The students were excited. Everyone was really energetic. And so it was sort of all on Ethan at that point. By the time Biko finished, I think it was tied 4-4. And so fencing bouts go till 5.
Mhm.
And so there's definitely a lot of pressure there because whoever won the next sort of point was going to win that matchup. And
Yep.
so, yeah, Ethan ended up winning. I think what happened was the Boston College player sort of advanced, and in doing so, sort of opened himself up to an attack. Fencing is a very strategic sport, and so you always have to be mindful sort of where those openings are, and whenever you attack, you're sort of making yourself vulnerable, and so that's sort of what happened. And so both Biko and Ethan were able to finish up before Lev even was done, and so that match ended up not really mattering.
Yeah.
And so just very excited. You could tell like the whole team had sort of gathered down there. The women's team was up in the stands really cheering them on. And so it was just really exciting. And I think beating UNC before that, to be able to have that opportunity was also sort of a great storyline for them and something that just sort of added to the overall experience.
Yeah, before we finish, it's worth mentioning the women's team finished 3-1. They were the runner-up to Notre Dame, who's a giant of women's fencing and has won the ACC pretty much every single year over the last decade or so. But jumping back to the men's team, you mentioned beating North Carolina. They also beat reigning national champion Notre Dame. So moving forward into the postseason now, the NCAA tournament, where do you kind of see, does Duke have a chance to at least make some noise going forward?
I think beating Notre Dame is definitely a really, really good step, and really shows that they do have the ability to go really far in the tournament. I think last year they didn't finish in the top 10, as far as I know, but they still did pretty well, and so they've been hanging around in previous years, and they have competed well. And so it's definitely a really good sign. I know talking to Coach Omar, he was hesitant to sort of say one way or another. And I think the team's been a little bit inconsistent over the course of the year. And so, but just they showed that they have the ability to beat Notre Dame. And I think it's a great sign, especially if we look towards next year where we're going to see the NCAA in Cameron. So it's going to be a similar atmosphere and a similar environment to what we saw today. And so if, they don't compete as well this year, I think next year is going to be a great year for the team.
Yeah. Well, there you go. It's the third conference title for Duke and the first for Coach Omar, as Morgan outlined for us. Morgan, thank you so much for coming on, and make sure you keep up. I think the quarterfinal was March 7th for Duke fencing, so make sure we'll check out our coverage there on the website. Yeah. Morgan, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Blue Devil Beat. We're super excited to be joined by Thomas Baxter. Thomas is the senior associate editor over at the Cavalier Daily. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, so let's preview this matchup against two of the top in the ACC so far. Thomas, I kind of want to ask you a little bit about what Virginia has done this season, big picture wise, because Ryan Odom comes in first year and Virginia is now 24-3. Obviously, moving on from Tony Bennett, it's a big shoes to fill. But what did he do during the offseason to kind of revamp this roster and get this team back to where it had been in previous years?
Yeah, I mean, it was nearly a total revamp of the roster, and obviously they play in a very different style than what people familiar with ACC basketball are used to seeing from Virginia.
Sure. It's
kind of a mixed bag. There's a nice mix of star newcomers in terms of freshmen, local freshman guard Chance Mallory's big spark plug off the bench for this team, but also a mix of bringing in Europeans with freshman forward Tester Ritter and freshman center Johan Grunlow, and a bunch of transfers from both mid-majors and Power 5 level schools. There's just a lot of really regular contributors on this team, all of whom can step up in tough games. And it's a team that runs deep and plays a really fast and physical brand of basketball, which is what Ryan Odom has said since he took over. They play pressure full court, they shoot a lot of threes, they share the ball a lot, and it's been a winning season so far. It's been a lot of tight games in the past couple of weeks, but it's a team that's answered a lot of questions at the conference and has thrown at it so far.
Sure.
You just mentioned there's been a lot of winning, and the Cavaliers are currently on an 8-game win streak. What have you seen during that stretch of games that you think has made Virginia so successful in the ACC?
I think it's a mix of things. One of the big things is that because of the depth in this team, in many games there's been a different person stepping up to fill it, whether it's junior guard Sam Lewis against Notre Dame, or any other senior guard or graduate student guard. Malik Thomas has really stepped up in several, and freshman Chance Mallory has been awesome in a bunch of games. Against Miami recently, North Dakota State transfer Jakari White came off the bench and clinched it with a big step back three in the last 2 minutes. There's a lot of really big contributors on this team. What has really allowed them to sort of get in these positions against some tough teams is that they've become a much better team defensively. In the past bit, they limit the opponent's field goal percentages really well. Teams do get to the line against this team a fair bit, but in terms of restricting the defense, the full court pressure forces teams to start their offense with 22 seconds on the shot clock with a lot of regularity. And this team, being a really strong rebounding team, also limits the degree of second chance points. It's been when shots have cooled down in several games, the defense has really stepped up, especially in the second half with some good adjustments. And it's powered them, as you said, to an 8-game win streak, including a 3-point win over Miami just over the weekend.
You just mentioned in that stretch, you thought the spreading the ball, the versatility of the offense. How have you, obviously, Virginia's very deep about 9-man rotation. How have you seen kind of people find their roles throughout the season? And obviously now you have 4 guys scoring in double figures every night on average. So just how have you seen that balance kind of come together as we're getting late into the season here?
I think it actually came together pretty quickly. There's been a lot that's worked and clicked with a lot of it, but I think bringing in a lot of really experienced players allowed them to adjust to their roles really quickly. Both Tess DeRitter and Johan Grunlo came with significant professional experience. And a lot of players that were also brought in, especially the starting lineup, was formed with a lot of very experienced mid-major and even high-major players. Thinking of longtime BYU guard Dallin Hall, or a real standout in conference play has been center Ugonna Nyenso, who played at Kentucky and K-State for the past 3 years. It's been a lot of people who came in and really embraced their roles, and they share the ball a fair bit. There are clearly leading scorers with DeRitter especially, but the ball moves. It's a fast team in transition, and there's not really been a lot of, as you can tell by the only 3 losses, the team got off to a really strong start, including a December win over Texas was a big sort of demonstration of this working off it.
Yeah, and you mentioned DeRitter right there, obviously leading the team with nearly 16 points per game. Can you give us the scouting report on him? He's a long, versatile freshman who seems to, can stretch the floor and score from a bunch of different places on the court. What should Duke fans expect from him on Saturday?
Yeah, the guy's physical. It's tough. He's got a lot of versatility just playing inside of the arc. He has a hook shot that he loves. He spins off of people really well. He attracts double teams and is really calm against them. It's very clear that his experience in the top flight of Spanish basketball has sort of allowed him to sort of see what it is to go up against high-level athletes and high-level game planning. He's risen to the occasion when other teams have thrown doubles at him. He can shoot a little bit. That's fallen off a little bit. And he gets to the line pretty well. I think the big thing is that he's a really calm and collected player in the post offensively, and he's a really physical, grown athlete defensively as well.
Yeah, he's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. And Virginia's obviously coming off a 86-83 home win against Miami, who has also been playing really well in the ACC. In that game, Jakari White was great from 3, but you just really showcased the depth and the shooting of this team. I think 50% from deep there, and Virginia was able to hold Miami off there and be clutch down the stretch. What did that game teach you about this team, especially because, during the win streak, they were against some lesser ACC opponents, but you were really able to get this one against top 5, top 6 team in the league?
Yeah, one of the big things with the Miami game is that Virginia was also missing a big bench piece in graduate forward Devin Tillis, a transfer from UC Irvine, who's a big spacing and also just a very good rebounder off the bench. It forced DeRitter to play 36 minutes against a really big and really physical Miami front court. A big thing in that Miami game, which has sort of flipped the script a little bit for this Virginia side, is that Miami only shot 17 free throws, and they shot 16 for 17, which is well above their season average. For a very physical side with led by really strong players like Shelton Henderson, Malik Renaud, and Ernest Uday Jr., this has been a big departure for what you'd expect from this Virginia team. The Miami team that guessed the line with regularity, Virginia held to only 17 free throws, and it allowed them to sort of ramp up the defensive intensity in the second half, limit foul trouble, even though there were a few fouls in the first half that got some guys on 2 or 3 fouls. But that was sort of a big defining thing against that team. Virginia obviously shot the ball well. They've been closing games fairly well throughout the season. And that was seen in the last 2 minutes with a bunch of clutch free throws and baskets. But getting a hold of this team defensively, throwing doubles at Malik Renaud forced, I think, 6 turnovers and limiting the free throws was really just something that allowed them to constrain the physicality that Jai Lucas's team wanted to bring.
Obviously, it's hard to nitpick when you're 24-3, but if you had to give some weak points or vulnerabilities of this Cavaliers team, what would those be?
I think the biggest thing, and it's one that people have been harping on for probably since conference play began, is that this team does not get to the line a lot. And when it does, it's not the best percentage from the free throw line. With a bunch of physical players, including DeRitter, but also a really strong pair of centers in Grunlow and Yenso, this is a team that probably should be spending more time at the charity stripe. And with guards that really attack the rim because of that versatility with the front court, you'd expect a lot better. It's had some good games in terms of shooting free throws. Ohio State recently, I believe they shot over 30. I might be wrong there, but that's been a big cause for concern. And then the other thing, which is the reason that North Carolina got the better of the Cavaliers not too long ago, has just been in transition. The Tar Heels torched Odom's squad off of rebounds and off of turnovers, and the transition defense just was not where the Cavaliers wanted it to be.
Yeah, interesting. Going into this matchup Saturday, when you look at this, is there a player on Virginia's team that you think really needs to have a big day in order for the Cavaliers to win? Obviously, coming into Cameron is going to be tough to knock off Duke, but is there an X factor that you're looking at? Maybe someone either off the bench or maybe not a leading scorer that you think could have a big day against the Blue Devils?
I think a player that's been a big X factor in a lot of the closer games that the Virginia has played has been Sam Lewis, junior guard transfer from Toledo. He's the elevator pitch when they brought him in was that he's a lights out shooter. But as a starter on this team, he's also shown some chops as a driver and as a good defender, grabs a lot of defensive rebounds and offensive ones too. In a handful of our closest games, he's been a reliable end of shot clock scorer. And I think that's been a difference against stronger teams and will be a difference against a team like Duke, where the two front courts are going to match up in a very tough game, and the back court and the spacing probably be a difference maker for either team.
Finally, looking ahead to this game on Saturday at noon, if you had to give some keys to the game you think Virginia needs to hit to win the game, what would those be?
I think the shot needs to fall. Is obviously a big thing in these very tight top of conference matchups. I think keep doing what they've been doing all season with the offensive rebounds, especially as one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country, will be very important. And just keeping the front court out of foul trouble will allow them to play the right kind of defense they like doing. They like playing aggressive defense around the perimeter and force teams to attack the basket because they have Grunlow and Yenso, two of the best drop defenders in the conference, if not Division I. And the big things in this game will just be making sure that shots can fall, and if they aren't, finding ways to adjust and forcing Duke's offense to sort of play into the defense that they've gotten a lot of success with even against top teams.
And then if you had to, don't want to put you on the spot, but if you had to give a pick for the game right now, obviously it's only Tuesday, but where do you have this game leading on Saturday?
I imagine a lot of listeners are going to be expecting a Duke win. It's tough to bet against this team that's been so successful on the road this season and is on such a strong win streak. I think it'll be a 2-possession game either way, but I'll have to go with Virginia on this one.
Oh, there you go.
All right, Thomas. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this game for a little bit. Lastly, can you tell all of our listeners and viewers where they can find your newspaper's work and your work personally as well?
Yeah, sure. You can find the Cavalier Daily's writing on cavalierdaily.com. We're the University of Virginia student newspaper. We do great stuff. On social media, you can find me at TBack Sports is my Twitter. You don't need to follow me on Instagram. That's not where I post any sports-related stuff. But yeah, check us out. And it was great. It was great talking to you guys.
Yeah, awesome. We'll definitely check your work. The Cavalier Daily does phenomenal stuff, and we love having them on. Thomas, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, we'll be right back. All right, thank you so much to Thomas for coming on. That was great analysis about the game. I'm excited to see this game because I frankly have not watched a bunch of Virginia basketball up to this point, but I'm excited to see the change in style that they have. They seem to be the pressure a lot. They have size down low. They have very experienced guards. I mean, Dylan Hall's a phenomenal point guard out of BYU. And yeah, I'm curious to see how Duke adjusts to this, especially after being so solid of late and playing kind of a different style team. One thing of note is we are recording this Tuesday. Duke plays Notre Dame tonight. We'll probably not have this out by then, but important win nonetheless for Duke to travel on the road. Any road game in the ACC is a tough one, so that should be an interesting contest for Duke. And the Virginia one at home in Cameron at noon on Saturday, like we mentioned. I feel like this game's going to be a close one, but I have a slight edge towards Duke. They haven't lost at home in 2 years in Cameron, and I'm not sure if this one changes unless Virginia shoots the light out of the ball.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Duke playing Notre Dame tonight. The same thing goes for Virginia's playing NC State tonight, which is, I think, a much more telling game than Duke Notre Dame will be. But looking at the Cavaliers, I think the statistical profile is really similar to Duke in terms of they crash the glass really well, they defend really well down low, and they take care of the ball and make teams grind it out and play long possessions. But I think, like you mentioned, I think if it's a game that's for same teams have the same strength, I guess. I think Duke's a little bit stronger just overall than Virginia. So, like you mentioned, I think unless Virginia has a big night, and they're 63rd in the country in 3-point percentage, so they're plenty capable. But I don't foresee it being an upset. We'll see. I think Tom's mentioned a lot about the free throw line, and it might be nice to have a game where Duke isn't in foul trouble, and Virginia maybe is in foul trouble because Virginia doesn't draw any fouls. But obviously you never know. But I think it'll be a close one. But I have Duke maybe by 5 or 6.
Yeah, and I think in Cameron, I was going to say one other thing about this matchup is Virginia seems to excel really on the offensive glass, but defensive glass not as much. And we saw against Michigan how good Duke was at getting second chances. Duke is not a great shooting team regardless, so Duke is going to need to get those offensive rebounds. So we'll see if both sides can capitalize on their respective offensive glasses. But I think that matchup, Virginia's defensive rebounding versus Duke's offensive rebounding, is going to be the key to this game. Because if Virginia holds Duke to one shot for a lot of the time, I mean, I think Virginia can pull off this upset for real. But I'm similar to you. I see kind of a close Duke win here, but a good measuring stick in the ACC because I think this team is playing the second best in the ACC right now and could very well see this rematch in Charlotte in a few weeks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for us today. This has been a fantastic episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoy this phenomenal week of college basketball. We'll be back next week to preview the final week of the regular season in basketball for the women's basketball team heading into the ACC championship. So that'll be super exciting. But yeah, we look forward to seeing you guys then. For Caleb Dudley, I'm Ranjan Jindal. This has been Blue Devil Beat.